Hey y'all, welcome. I am Christine. Appreciate you so much. This week we're going to be upcycling some bottles that I had on hand. One is going to be a root beer bottle. I'm not sure. I took the label off. I didn't show you guys. I'm not sure what brand this is, but look how dang cute with that top on there, the little stopper, and I'm leaving that on there, of course. And then this is just a paste, I think it is, salsa jar. And then I believe this is a bourbon bottle. I can't be certain. Anyhow, I think that's what that is, but I think it was so cute too. And I'm leaving that top on there as well with a little cork bottom to it. So we're going to start with the root beer bottle, and I'm using a mold I got from Amazon. Kind of looks like a crest, but it's 3 little parts. You'll see that when I empty it, and I'll leave the link below where I ordered this from, so if you guys are interested in it. This is the first time I've used this mold. Now, the sides don't have that raised rim like your IOD molds are going to have, but it was very deep. I did like that so that your mold is thick, and it did sit up well, and it did paint well, so I will give them that. I enjoy this mold. I will be using it. So I'm just showing you here. You're going to lay down in your mold. Of course, in case you don't know, some cornstarch. Now that's going to keep this clay from sticking, and it's going to help it release from your silicone mold. And then I take DOS air dry clay. Make sure you do store your clay in a airtight bag that just keeps it from hardening. And then I'm just going to work it with my fingers. I kind of roll it into like a snake figure. And then I'm going to take my fingers and work it in there. And I use one of my art knives, my palette knives. I know a lot of people use credit cards just to push that in there further and to take off any excess. Because you just want it, the top surface, which you're going to be laying down and gluing, you want that to be flat. And you want to be sure to get all designs. You can see here, these are very delicate little molds. So you just want to make sure you push that in real good. So I do use, with my air dry clay, I use Tight Bond Quick and Thick to apply it. I just smooth this out with my fingers. You can always use a brush or a little craft stick or whatever to smooth it out. I'm going to lay this on my bottle, and I did use 2 little surfaces here to keep my bottle from rolling. And then when I put it on, I'm just going to use a tapping with my fingers just to push that down onto the bottle. You don't want it sitting up, if that makes sense. You want to push that glue down and push that mold down. Now, if you get any excess glue, just take a wet wipe and go around the edges, or take your finger and remove your glue. So I'm going to do the same with each side, because it had 2 little sides to it. You can see me here propping up my bottle. And then I'm going to use masking tape to let this set up and dry. Now, normally if I'm doing molds on a flat surface, I'm going to paint them before they dry, but because I'm using bottles and they've got to sit up, or I want them sitting up, I do tape this down and let it completely dry. And I did not have a problem with my molds cracking, because sometimes that could be a possibility, but I really didn't have that issue. So get that on there, let it dry completely, and then I'm coming in with 2 coats of cottage white chalk paint, and that is from Folk Art. You see me here just working on my little molds, but yeah, look how cute that is. I guess that's like the laurels. I'm not sure, but anyhow, I liked it. There was a little divot in the front of the bottle, whatever the purpose of that was, so this covered it up. Plus, it gives you a great design as well, so it doesn't look like you just repurposing a little drink bottle. So, but I'm coming in with 2 coats of cottage white, and I'm going to use just a little chippy brush. And I started out going up and down, and I kind of had to do that to get the paint good onto the mold. Molds will suck up, that air dry clay will suck up paint, so make sure you do coat them pretty good, and look at your surface and make sure especially when you're doing white, because that clay is an off-white color. So just make sure that it's in your surface and all around the edges. That's important as well. Make sure you're coating your edges of your molds well. But then I did like a side-to-side motion. The paint went on smoother, and I didn't have any brush strokes that way. I'm coming in with my Best Dang Whites and Brown, and I'm going to coat it heavily on my mold, and then wipe back to whatever your liking is. But I want it kind of heavy on my mold. And then I decided the bottle looked a little too white as opposed to the mold. So I did a light brushing around my bottle and then wipe that back as well. In all my projects, in the end, I do put ribbons on them. And most of these ribbons I found a great deal at Goodwill. So I was real pleased with that. They did come from Hobby Lobby originally. I think they were $5 there was 2 different stacks that I got them from, but they were $5 and you get a bunch, so it's really not a bad deal from Hobby Lobby. But I got them from Goodwill for a really good buy. So I looked up them. So always check the bins with the ribbons, yarns, and whatever at your thrift store to make sure you're not passing up any good ribbons, because ribbons can really be expensive. So you can see me here just wiping back as I like all of the whites, and then this project is going to be done. So our next one is going to be the little salsa jar. So what a fabulous upcycle, am I right? So instead of throwing all these jars into the recycle center, and you never know how much of these they really recycle or how much they really throw in the landfill. So we can make beautiful decor with these bottles, especially if you've got a bottle that has a nice little curvature to it. You like the design of it, or even the top, because that root beer bottle, that top was so fabulous. So just keep it in mind when decorating. These make great little vases, so don't leave them out. And let's try to reuse and repurpose items. So I am using the Redesign Elegant Borders, and this is the first time using that wider strip there. It's got like a heart design to it. So it took one and not quite all of another one. So you see me here, don't worry about it. You don't have to completely fill up your molds. That would be, well, it wouldn't be wasting, because you could throw it back in your air dry clay, but you don't have to fill them up completely. So what I'm going to do is line it up to the seam, and then the other side that goes over, I'm going to let it actually fall over, and I'm going to cut it with my little art knife to make a seamless seam. A seamless seam there. So you can see me when I do this. So I make a good even cut. And then your molds can separate some, especially I let it dry overnight. It did separate some at one of the seams. But just work with your fingers to kind of press it in there, and you'll see me kind of pressing it together to get rid of that seam. It's hard to get rid of those seams completely unless you're using molds that are made to fit together. Now, IOD does have molds that are made to fit together. These are not, so I'm just lining up straight edges with a straight edge, and sometimes it's hard to get that in there, but work it as best you can. You see me cutting my palette knife here, so I've got the top layer, and then I'm going to pick it up and take off that bottom layer, and that makes a nice, clean cut there. Now, on the bottle, I am going to do the cottage white again. I did 2 coats on that as well. And then I am coming back with the brown whites, and I am going to do my mold with that. Now, I'm not going to do my bottle with the brown whites. I'm only going to do the mold part of that. And I did put that in there kind of heavy, and then, of course, you use your wet wipe to come in and take it off as you want. But then when I did that, I thought about, I'm going to use a stamp. I don't have any brown, so I do come in with my Rub and Buff, and that's the gold leaf Rub and Buff, and I picked these up from, you can order them on Amazon, but I have picked them up from Hobby Lobby before. I love Rub and Buff, and I just apply Rub and Buff with my fingers. Now, I applied it kind of heavy, But then when I wipe it back, I'm going to wipe it back so you can see. I actually want to see some of that cream color on the mold itself, and I want to see that brown. So I'm going to wipe it back pretty hard so I can see all of that. So I want to see the gold, but I don't want to just see the gold. I want to see that brown too. And I did have to take a little paintbrush and go around the top. I'm not worried about the underside because you're not really going to see that. And then I didn't worry about the brown wax, but I did put the rub and buff on the top of the mold as well. Just so when you're looking at it, you don't see the stark white. You're actually going to see, it's going to just look seamless because your mold is covered, if that makes sense. Then I am going to come in, like I said, with a stamp. So you know I'm using a gold stamp pad. Now I got my gold stamp pad from Hobby Lobby. And I'm going to use Redesign with Prima mold set, and this is the Monarch collection. This is a beautiful collection, y'all. I've used it a couple of times now, and I haven't used all of the molds yet. That's the great thing. I mean, the stamps. That's the great thing about these stamps and the molds. You have so many in a collection that you can do so many different projects and maybe still not use all of them. But then you'll think one day that, oh, yeah, I want to use that. This has got some dragonflies in it, butterflies in it. I think it's got bees. Yes, it's got a bee in it. Ladybug. I don't think I've used a ladybug yet. So anyhow, I am going to come in and stamp back of my stamp. Now, if you haven't used stamps before, be sure the first time you get them that you take a light sandpaper. Usually I use my little hand sander and just rough it up a little bit. You want to make it where it's not so slick, because if it's too slick, your ink may not stick to it and it's just not going to apply well. So you want to rough up the back a little bit. And when I say back, that's going to be the side that you're going to put the stamp on. That's your raised side. Your flat side is going to be the side that you're using to hold down and press in your design. So that's my tip if you haven't used stamps before. Now, when I'm doing this, I'm not using a heavy pressure here. So the heavier that you use your ink pad, of course, the thicker your ink is going to be on your project. I didn't want this to stand out so much. I wanted it to more blend into the jar, more like it's been there for a while. It's aged a little bit. So you can see the design when I'm through, but it's not just a stark gold staring at you. Now, stamps, if you're doing a curved surface, I don't use the little backer paper. I'm just going to apply the stamp down. So just go in at it straight down. Now, my next project, it moves around a little bit. You can see it. And the great thing about stamps, too, is if you notice your flaw to begin with, you can completely wipe it off with a wet wipe. You can completely wipe it off and come back and redo it. I've had to do that several times. I'm not going to tell you it hasn't happened, but it didn't happen on these projects, thank goodness. Did move a little bit, but a little movement's not bad, but a lot of movement, trust me. Go ahead immediately and take that off. So apply your pressure with one hand and then start working your other hand around. Make sure you get all the way to the edges and lay it down. If you're going to move the one hand that's holding it down, make sure your other hand is pressed firmly on it. Move that around, lift straight up. Last project here is the little bourbon bottle. I'm going to say it's a bourbon bottle. I think that's what it is. And I didn't show you, but I used 2 coats. This is Dixie Belle Silk all-in-one mineral paint. This isn't chalk paint. This is mineral paint. It's got a built-in primer and a built-in top coat. Now, this is what I've learned using this a couple of times. So if you use this, I would go in with a foam brush. I used my bristle brushes, and I've used this paint a couple of times, and I can't seem to remember it, but every time I've used the bristle brushes, I've had to come back in with my wet wipe and completely remove that paint. So I would suggest using the foam brush. It doesn't move your paint around, because what's happened is I'll let my first coat dry, come in with my second coat, and my bristles are sitting there peeling up my first coat. Use your foam brush. Now I'm using the crockery stamp set by IOD. And you can see it moved a little bit, but it's still so pretty. So, and I used my IOD black ink with that. So same method for laying your stamps down. I'm coming in with white wax all over the piece because I'm going to put another wax on top, but I also wanted to tone down that black ink. Now I'm doing this pretty heavy, and when I wipe it back, I'm not going to wipe it back hard. I'm going to leave this on pretty heavy because this is my complete sealer. Now the reason why I did this too is because I'm coming on top with a gray wax, Grunge Gray by Dixie Belle. And if you lay down a clear wax or a white wax first, it gives you more control of removing and moving around your second wax color. Keep that in mind because I did not want the gray wax heavy at all. I used light strokes when applying it, and then I wiped back majority of it. And I'm just showing you here on the last bottle kind of how I did my ribbons. And this is kind of how I did my ribbon for all of them. I'm not going to do a bow. Just kind of thinking these jars don't really call for a bow. I'm not using a bow. I'm just tying it. And this one I tied one time. To others I did tie a complete knot. And then just cut your ribbons however. If you want, if they've got like an edge, you can pull some of the strings loose. If you're going for a look that's aged or worn, then you'll want that look. Make your ribbons match your project, if that makes sense. But you'll see here, I'm kind of taking out the bottoms, working those around, but tie them however. And these projects are done. You guys throw me some comments. I appreciate those so much. If you haven't already, please smash that subscribe button. Help my little channel grow. It helps me to continue bringing you videos, and I really love crafting, and I love hearing from you guys. Thank you so much.